Claire Curran.
Mr. Speaker, thousands of New Zealanders are watching tonight wanting this bill to pass because it's a really important piece of legislation. It's about getting a horrible, toxic, poisonous drug or set of drugs out of our dairies, out of our lives, and dealing to an issue that I think everyone in this House acknowledges is really important. It's just such a contradiction to the previous piece of legislation that none of the members in this House today want to get up and talk about this important piece of legislation, but they wanted to speak about the last piece of legislation, which was about keeping another major problem in our community and making it worse. So on the one hand, we're trying to take out toxic, poisonous drugs from our dairies, and on the other hand, we're increasing another toxic problem in our society, which is problem gambling. And they should be ashamed of that. And they should be ashamed that they didn't take a conscience vote, a personal vote on that issue. Because it is a conscience vote, and it just shows that the people across the House don't have a conscience. Mr. Speaker, this bill is important. I'm proud to be speaking on it. I'm proud to be part of a caucus that has worked really hard on this bill. We've got some people on our side of the House who have worked really hard during the Select Committee to make sure that this is a much better piece of legislation. Ian Lees-Galloway and Annette King being two of them, and who have made sure that we have made this bill a better law that will go into our community, that will take these drugs out of the community. I also want to commend the Greens for the amendment that they put forward on animal testing. We did support that amendment. We don't want these drugs to be used, to be tested on animals. National refused to give up animal testing, but we in Labor are proud of the fact that our MPs were able to get the government to agree to changes to the bill to ensure that there were alternatives to animal testing, that alternatives exist that can't be used in the evaluation of these substances. And while Mojo's Mather's amendment did not pass, at least there will be some safeguards now around that animal testing. Mr. Speaker, I have received emails all day today from people about this bill, as well as emails, as no doubt every member in this House has, about the other bill that passed its first reading in the House before this. Emails from people who are raising the issues and are talking about the increased harm that is happening as a result of the taking of these substances. I'm going to read to you one of those emails that I received this afternoon. It read, "I have ongoing concerns with people who use these drugs and who have future access to them, increasing burdens on healthcare providers and patients suffering clinical effects related to psychosis, withdrawal symptoms, which can prevail for weeks, and addiction. There have already been a noticeable increase over recent months, but will most likely increase." Mr. Speaker, when I stood up in the House and in the committee stages, I showed a report from the National Poison Centre on the number of calls that have been coming in the last year on these substances. I've got another table to hold up today which shows the number of calls for June in red. And it shows it's gone down very, very slightly from May, but there's been a huge increase in the last few months from the calls that have come in to the National Poison Centre about these psychoactive substances. And the reasons for that may be related to the increased publicity around this, but health professionals are sending us warnings as politicians that we have to put in place legislation, but along with legislation comes the need for increased resources to our health sector to deal with the effects of these psychoactive substances to our mental health sector, and also to look at what is happening with the increased crime related to the use of these substances. I'll just read to you the latest report that's come in. It reads that the rates of calls to the National Poison Centre have remained high, and this is for June, continuing trends since April 2013. Adverse symptoms reported in April and May, notably acute kidney injury, seizures and acute psychosis, have continued to occur during June, with a further observation of an emerging trend of delayed seizures that are increasingly difficult to control. These are drugs that are doing serious harm that has not been seen by other drugs. Ongoing discussions and meetings with emergency departments, medical centres and other healthcare providers also report increasing burdens on their services by users of these drugs. Rates of attending patients continuing to rise, in particular patients suffering addiction and withdrawal effects. With the banning of all present designer drugs in July, the National Poison Centre anticipates this demand on healthcare services will continue to increase. And it goes on to say that the National Poison Centre continues to be concerned by the rates of reported adverse effects following exposure to these analogues, although the introduction of the new legislation this month will ban present designer drugs being legally sold. There will be ongoing burdens on healthcare providers with patients suffering adverse psychiatric effects, which in some patients will be permanent, and issues centred on addiction and withdrawal syndrome. Mr. Speaker, throughout the whole of the discussion on this bill, I have asked over and over again, as have a number of my colleagues, we ensured that it was mentioned in the commentary to this bill. I have asked, where is the comparable resources that are going to be put from the health sector into the need for what is going to happen after these drugs are banned, and what we're seeing right now. The health professionals tell us that there is increasing need and that there is no more resources being put in. There is an increasing burden happening as a result of this. And I ask the question again in the House today, where are the extra resources that will be put in? Mr. Speaker, we support this bill. We know it's an important bill. We know that it's got a lot of measures in it that are changing the way that we are treating our attitude to drugs in this country, that we are looking at it from a harm minimisation perspective, which is a healthy and constructive and positive thing to do. I just want to quickly say that the purpose in going into a couple of those measures, and I know that my colleague Ian Lees-Galloway and other colleagues on the Health Committee worked hard on this, on changing parts of the legislation, particularly around the purpose, which now reads that the purpose of this Act is to regulate the availability of psychoactive substances in New Zealand, which was what was originally said, but they added the words to protect the health of and minimise harm to individuals who use psychoactive substances. Those are such important words, the minimising of harm. It is moving the effect of drug taking into the health sector. We need to be looking more across the spectrum of the drugs that are being taken in New Zealand and the harm that is occurring, and looking at it from the perspective of harm minimisation. We need to be looking at other social harms that are occurring, such as problem gambling. This Parliament today could have done a brave thing, and it could have addressed problem gambling as well as psychoactive substances. Instead, it has cancelled out, more or less, what we are achieving with psychoactive substances and increasing problem gambling in New Zealand.
Kevin Haig.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the interests of ensuring that this bill is passed today, I'm going to take a somewhat shorter